the big new selling points for Miraculous Season 6 has been a pivot in the way the show's seemingly been written, with a big emphasis on fleshing out characters and giving everybody a story and an arc. It's been a long time coming in this regard. Once upon a time, pretty much the only characters getting extensive character development were Chloe, Marinette, and Felix when he was introduced. Other characters would take the focus every now and then in a single episode, but it didn't have the same punch and impact. Storylines would progress at a snail's pace, and when Ladybug and Cat Noir would team up with some of these lesser heroes, it would be more about using their power set and just having some extra characters to get smacked around by the villains, more than it was for them getting a showcase of their own character and story. Season 6 feels different in that regard. In many ways, it feels the writing's improved and that they've figured out how to balance showcasing character development and story for the leads, who in turn remain central to every episode, whilst also developing more team dynamics and fleshing out the lives and stories of the side characters. As part of this new style, we've been getting some dedicated episodes that largely explore the stories of these minor characters, and they've been really popular so far. The writing is really night and day, striking that balance by not sidelining Ladybug and Cat Noir too much, still giving them a story that often revolves around their romance, whilst also helping us to see these other characters in a whole new light. We've had 3 of these episodes so far, but it seems likely we might be getting one for each member of the cast. It just feels right. These are what we've had so far. First up was episode 4, Daddy Cop, which is an episode that follows Sabrina in the aftermath of her ditching Chloe, declaring that she doesn't need such a toxic friend. Here we see the somewhat realistic aftermath of somebody being a bully to a group of people for years and years, and then trying to change their ways. Social distance and isolation. A lack of trust that you've truly changed as a person, and a lack of a desire to properly get to know you anymore. This in turn leads to Zoe, who seems to know how it feels based on how her storyline seems to be heading, to offer an olive branch to Sabrina and try to get her an invite to the girls' monthly movie night before it all goes wrong, mostly due to Marinette's side story of being a weirdo about her 100th kiss with Adrien, whilst he also gets to set some boundaries with her about doing weirdo things like inviting him for a date during their girls' movie night. This one was a really powerful and well-written episode. In isolation, I think it's one of my favourites, even if I did recently sour on her whole redemption arc and think it came somewhat out of left field in Season 5 and didn't feel earned in terms of the writing. I like that they did acknowledge that during this episode, that at the very least she doesn't deserve that redemption, and the girls are being very generous accepting her after everything that went down. That was the first one, and it was a banger, but I do think that it pales in comparison to how good both El Toro de Pedra and The Ruler are. Not because it's bad at all, but just because those two are on a completely different level of quality. The first one is largely an Ivan episode where they explore this idea that his father's a career criminal with anger issues that wants Ivan to follow in his footsteps and help him steal the Mona Lisa. It showcases the impact generational trauma and toxic masculinity can have on your life, and sees Ivan take a stand against his dad, rejecting him for his unrepentant criminal ways, whilst also offering that olive branch to perhaps change at some point, and by doing so, potentially foster a closer relationship with his son. At the same time, the episode further explores Marinette's guilt about not telling Adrien the truth about his father, sees Rose and Julika have their first kiss and confirm their romantic relationship at long last after years and years of teasing, and also explores some of Adrien's backstory with his dad, and how when he was young he was a good father, and along the way he changed. It really is the perfect episode. Same with Ruler, my god, Ruler! This is an episode that came out of nowhere and quickly became one of the best episodes that's ever been produced in the history of this show. It is an episode that focuses heavily on the often neglected character of Nathaniel in a story that uses his parents, specifically his mother's rejection of his comic books, as an analogy for homophobia. In turn, in his hero persona, he has to overcome his mother's toxicity and show that he's strong enough to stand up to her, and by doing so he reaffirms his relationship with Mark, who Nate's mom had been blaming for corrupting her son. It's a really heavy episode that dealt with complex themes and elevated Nathaniel's character so much. He went from an absolute nothing background character to somebody who has a lot of narrative depth and a compelling backstory in the span of 20 minutes. However, that's only 3 characters we've gotten episodes for so far, and there's every indication that we might be getting a lot more over the course of this season, and that's what I want to talk about today. I want to piece together what episodes might focus on which characters, and how it might bring about a character renaissance for each subject of focus, like it has for Ivan, Nate, and Sabrina. Okay, so we can already rule out a couple of episodes from our speculation, right? After all, we've already had a few episodes already released that either introduce new characters or focus more heavily on Adrien and Marinette and their individual and couple storylines. In that category, we have Climatic Queen, which is the first episode of the season, and it's mostly a pretty general setup episode. Illustrator follows Marinette and Adrien's budding relationship whilst also having a cool Big Four team-up sequence in it. Sublimation introduces a new character who seems likely to be getting involved in the story in a massive way in the future, judging by the fact that she ends up being sponsored by Madame Tsurugi at the end. Where Papas was a very Adrien-centric episode in terms of fleshing out his family dynamics and backstory, as well as confirming to us that he and Natalie love each other like a mother and a son. Finally, Revelator continues to flesh out Adrien and Marinette while showcasing some Marinette and Ali moments too, when Alia briefly learns the truth and calls out Marinette for lying to Adrien. It pretty much confirms to the audience that all the lies are going to come back to bite Marinette in the ass, and that it's all going to end in tears. Now, it does seem clear that we're going to get more episodes in that vein as well, where it explores non-Miracular characters or pushes forward the main story exclusively. But I think I'm far more excited about the side hero adventures. So let's try to figure out what hero could get what episode and what might happen, simply based on these titles, right? Let's start off with the remaining episodes in the first 10. Sleeping Siren is very clearly going to feature Ondine as the akumatized villain, right? I mean, Siren's her typical name when she's akumatized, and thus Sleeping Siren feels like the right choice here for her new Chrysalis variant power-up. This in turn surely means that the featured side hero is going to be Kim, seeing as he's her boyfriend and has been since season 2. As for what the storyline could be, well, I think Kim's been an extremely stagnant, idiot bro character for a very long time. It did feel that early on he was presented as a bully, and that over time they did start to change him into more of a generic himbo. But then in derision, he is such a douchebag, and he only briefly apologizes at the end. I think that this needs to be a character-defining episode that well and truly shifts the status quo to make him a better boyfriend and a better friend. I'm pretty much certain that he's going to be the reason she gets akumatized, and that he's going to be the main figure that has to save her, whilst also showcasing how he can improve as a person. Not just a lame apology, we need to see this dude progress, because right now, he is by far the shittiest member of the entire hero team, and it's by a country mile. I'd say Felix can get some spotlight with Vampirgami, right? The name Vampirgami feels like a clear clue that it's going to be Kagami getting akumatized. But what would be the reason? I would suspect that with her mother's rise in prominence, it's going to be something to do with her. Plus, this is the episode that follows off from Toro de Pedra, which introduced that secret council that Natalie's going to be working with. We've all figured that the machine is probably Tomoe, so they might have her jump right into things and somehow alienate her daughter. I think in terms of the heroes we've seen, Felix actually had some of the most development despite his relatively few appearances. So I'm not really looking for much personal development from him in a Felix-focused episode. His episodes are actually quite famous for pushing forward the plot and learning about villains and motives, so I think I'd like to see him going head-to-head with Kagami's mum, and also just some Kagami-Felix moments too. I feel like they don't get that much screen time as a couple, so this could be a chance to change that. We'll stay in that vein and go Kagami for Yaxi Gozen. Her mum was the akumatized villain for Ikari Gozen and Multiplication in Season 5, where she became Ikari Dozen. Sticking with that naming theme, it would make sense that Kagami's mum is the villain of this episode. I think here we're going to get Kagami actually standing up to her mum, calling her out for everything she's done and continuing to do. It feels like this episode could have a similar feeling to Ivan and Nate's, except I'm not sure it'll have that same hopeful ending. I don't see her mum changing anytime soon. Maybe she'll lie to Kagami and say, "Oh yes dear, I've totally changed." But we all know it's going to be bullshit. At best, I think this episode ends like with Adrian and Gabe watching Solitude together. It's feel good, but you know it won't last. From here, I think we could probably knock another out with Zoe. We do know that Chloe's coming back into the story at some point. We do know that she'll almost certainly still be presented as a villain. Gotta keep on beating that dead horse, gotta beat it into the ground. Regardless, if Chloe's coming back, she is for sure getting akumatized, and so it's the perfect time for Zoe to enter the chat and for her to get an episode that dives into her backstory that was referenced in Daddy Cop. I'm thinking that this episode will probably be Queen of the Dread Zone. That feels like it could make sense, right? I feel like we can easily take Sad Nancy as another one. I'm pretty sure this is going to be Alia's older sister getting akumatized again, as remember, her original form, was it not called Adnancy? Something like that? Immediately this would make you think, oh, well it's got to be an Alia episode, right? But would it? I guess you could dive a bit deeper into her family dynamics here and it would work, but then I started thinking, the original episode was very much about introducing Nino as Carapace and bringing in a new hero. It made Nino seem really awesome and important, but in the meantime, it feels like Nino's importance and character fell off a cliff to be pure comic relief. I think in turn that this episode could be used to be a bit of a reset for his character and give him a bit of uplift and development. I did read somewhere that one of the writers is a big Nino fan, so I'm pretty optimistic about that. Either way, Sad Nancy is either Nino or Alia, one of the two, but I would lean Nino. Then we have a couple of characters who, to be honest, are pretty hard to pin down. Milen, Mark, Max. Does anybody have ideas for these guys? Granted, might not even happen this season, right? They probably will keep giving episodes to various different characters for the rest of the show's run, as, to be honest, it's just a better way of writing because it helps keep things fresh and exciting. I personally haven't felt this hyped up for the show in ages, although I will say that the long gaps between installments do dampen that enthusiasm quite a bit. So yeah, the 3 M's, I'm not really all that sure about that to tell you the truth. Could be any of the episodes, or it could be none of them. We'll have to wait and see, won't we, unless you care to share your thoughts. Next up, I think we can check off either Rose or Julika, because whilst they do have some time during Toro de Pedra, I feel like they need their own proper focused episodes too, rather than just being the B-plot. A Fairy Good Night feels like it could focus on them. A fairy aesthetic really does fit Rose's character, right? My crack idea for this one is Julika discarding her current aesthetic to be more pink and over the top, thinking that this is what Rose would prefer. Rose simply wants her goth GF back. Antics ensue, somebody gets akumatized, and one of them helps Ladybug and Cat Noir fix things up. Luka is very obviously going to be getting an episode as well, as we've seen content of him in Brazil, but I don't think they ever told us the episode that would happen in. Either way, his episode from what I remember had a pretend girlfriend, which on paper sounds cringe as all hell, so I hope they don't massacre my boy. Maybe this could be Heart Fixer? This in turn leaves us with the two big guns who've had big moments historically, Alia and Alex. I feel like one of them could be important in Lady Chaos, which feels like it's going to be the long-awaited Marinette Gets Akumatized episode, given that it's episode 22, which is the same number as Cat Blanc, and Ephemeral, which are Adrian Gets Akumatized episodes. At first, I was thinking Alia for this episode, given that she is by far the third most important member of the team aside from Cat Noir and Ladybug, and so if Cat Noir needs a sidekick to take on Lady Chaos, she's a good pick. But then I got thinking, whenever there's an Akumatize of one of the major heroes, it always ends up being walked back with time travel shenanigans. Thus, I kind of think if you're gonna have a character pull focus in a Marinette Gets Akumatized episode, besides just Cat Noir, then it has to kind of be Alex, right? Her power is quite literally a get out of jail free card, as we see in the London special, where she is the sole reason why their reality was not initially erased by Lila's wish. Part of me thinks that this means that they have to undo things with time travel. Because let's not forget that Adrian, who often loses, was supremely OP when he was akumatized. Can you imagine how they're going to write Marinette if that's the case? The girl barely ever loses to begin with and has a plan for every occasion. The Miraculers would be absolutely cooked. She would get akumatized, all the heroes will assemble, she defeats them all, and so Alex has to swoop in for the time travel where she maybe snatches a past Adrian to help her prevent Ladybug being akumatized in the first place. Honestly, now that I'm saying it, that idea sounds pretty fire to tell you the truth. If you have a time travel get out of jail free card, in this instance, I don't see why you can't dial things up to 11 and have her go fully insane. Although at the same time, would this really flesh out Alex all that much? Who knows really. I think it'll be fun though. At this point, I do need to throw in the towel because the reality is I don't have enough information to keep on pushing. Either way, I'm excited for some of these concepts if they pan out, and I'm curious to see how they distribute character development to all the characters we haven't seen much of yet. If they do it all, you never know, I guess. But anyway, I'll just remind you these have all been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of some of my ideas? Are you with me? Maybe not? Can you fill in some of the blanks I've left with some of your own ideas? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.